We start tonight with India's borders. Recently, China issued a new map. It made sweeping claims on Indian land. Today, India has given a response. India has launched new infrastructure projects along the border. India's defense minister was in Jammu today. He unveiled 90 projects, 90. They're spread out across India's border with China. And what kind of projects are these? Well, we have a list. 22 roads, 63 bridges, 1 tunnel, 2 airfields and 2 helipads. So 90 projects in all. India's Border Roads Organization, or BRO, has built these projects. This is a government department. It maintains road networks in India's border areas, hence the name Border Roads Organization. And what is the cost of these projects? More than $300 million. This is strategic investment. India needs better infra at the border to deal with the threat that China poses. While talks are on to de-escalate, it's important to be prepared for the worst. Last month, on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in South Africa, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi are said to have reached an agreement, some sort of a deal to de-escalate. But we've seen no forward movement since. In the meantime, the Chinese side has been rapidly expanding infrastructure along the border. We have an assessment. Last year, India's army chief gave some details. His name is General Manoj Pandey. He said China's construction continues unabated. In fact, let me quote from what he said. In terms of infrastructure development, that is going unabated. There is road infrastructure, helipads, airfields, including roads right up to the passes. General Pandey highlighted one project in particular. It's called the G695 road. As of July 2022, China was yet to begin work on this. Now, what is the purpose of this highway? To connect Tibet to Xinjiang. According to the Indian Army assessment, this highway would run parallel to the LAC, the line of actual control, which is the de facto border between India and China. It will give China some unique advantages. They'll be able to move the forces closer to the LAC, also switch deployments from one sector to another. So irrespective of a de-escalation now, if and when it happens, China has long-term plans for this border. The PLA will keep building capacity on its side, and India has no option but to match it. For the Indian Army to be able to defend the border, you need infrastructure. You need connectivity to mobilize troops and to send supplies and reinforcements. China has been building infra for decades now. India started only a few years back. But even in this short period, India has made aggressive strides. Since the standoff in Ladakh began, India has taken a multi-pronged approach. Border connectivity has been improved through new roads, bridges, tunnels, highways, inland waterways and railroads. And where were these projects commissioned? Along the border with China, in Ladakh, in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. So 4 states and 1 union territory. India is building more roads and doing so at a faster pace. Let me show you some data. From 2008 to 2014, India constructed more than 3,600 kilometers of roads. Then from 2014 to 2022, India built more than 6,800 kilometers of roads. So in 8 years, the pace of construction has almost doubled. In addition to the infrastructure, India is adding more defense assets to the region. Recently, India deployed fighter jets in Ladakh, the French Rafales and the Sukhoi 30s. These jets are on high alert and they regularly conduct air patrols. This is to ensure thorough surveillance. In case of any misadventure by the Chinese side, these planes are ready to respond. Apart from this, new programs are being rolled out. This year, India announced a scheme called Vibrant Villages. Now, this is a new strategy. We told you about this. It's aimed at consolidating border areas. The program was announced in the month of April. The budget for this is almost $600 million. The first phase will cover almost 3,000 villages. India plans to build essential infrastructure in these villages. Things like all-weather roads, drinking water supplies, round-the-clock electricity, mobile and internet connectivity, and health and wellness centers. Now, these vibrant villages will be developed in the border regions in 4 states and the Union Territory of Ladakh, the ones that we mentioned. China has been watching India's moves, and it has spoken about the Vibrant Villages plan. China says it, quote-unquote, is firmly against this, which is funny, because China has no say in this. India has every right to develop villages on its side of the border, and this is a game that China started. They challenged India's sovereignty. And now they want to dictate India's moves. Unfortunately for them, it's not happening. When it comes to border infrastructure, India has a lot of catching up to do. But the 90 projects inaugurated today are a good response to China's map war. After the G20, many world leaders took a detour. Instead of going home, they visited other countries. US President Joe Biden went to Vietnam. French President Emmanuel Macron headed to Bangladesh. It was a very important visit, the first one by a French president in 33 years. As always, Macron hit the right notes. He visited a memorial to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Bangladesh's founder, and also Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's father. His talks with Hasina covered a number of issues like defense, trade, and the Indo-Pacific. There is speculation that Bangladesh could buy Rafale jets, the same ones that India has. So what exactly is brewing here? To understand that, we must understand Macron's ambitions. He unveiled an Indo-Pacific strategy in 2018, the only European leader to do so. He sees France as an Indo-Pacific power, not a US ally in the region, but a power in its own right. So in Dhaka, Macron talked about a third way, one that is different from China and the US. Listen to this.
We have a common desire to safeguard the independence of our countries, to not give in to any external pressure, and despite all current conflicts, to basically safeguard our freedom of sovereignty. As you know, I stand up for this third way in the Indo-Pacific region, based on the respect of sovereignty and the strategic autonomy of our partners.
And how did Sheikh Hasina respond? The Bangladeshi Prime Minister emphasized on regional stability. She said French and Bangladeshi leaders will play responsible roles.
To ensure the geopolitical stability in the Pacific region, leaderships in both Bangladesh and France will play responsible roles.
Where do the fighter jets come in? Bangladesh has announced a plan to modernize its military. They're buying fighter jets. 16 of them have been bought from China, the Chengdu J-7 jets. But Dhaka wants more. They want Western fighter jets in their arsenal too. And reports say it's down to two options, the Eurofighter Typhoon or the French Rafale. Paris may or may not get the fighter jet deal, but they have already scored another one. Bangladesh is buying 10 Airbus planes from France. The deal is worth around $3.2 billion. It is also symbolic. Bangladesh's flag carrier operates 20 planes. Most of them are American Boeings. But now Dhaka is going French. Beyond these deals, what are the political gains for President Macron? Well, Bangladesh is an Indo-Pacific country. It has a coastline of 720 kilometers, and right now it's hot property. Russia is building nuclear plants in Bangladesh. China has invested around $10 billion in this country. And then, of course, you have India, arguably Dhaka's most important partner. From the looks of it, President Macron also wants a piece of this. He visited the Pacific Islands in July. He also made a stopover in Sri Lanka. So the Indo-Pacific is firmly on his agenda. But will Dhaka buy his third way? A lot depends on how India plays this. Recently, the United States slapped sanctions on Bangladeshi officials. The reason? Alleged election interference. Washington wants a clean and fair election next year in Bangladesh. Dhaka says it's none of your business. So the relations were a bit frosty leading up to this weekend. But then came the G20. India invited Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina as a guest. And in New Delhi, she met multiple Western leaders, including US President Joe Biden. In fact, Biden took a selfie with Hasina and her daughter. She also had an interaction with Rishi Sunak. These pictures went viral. Sunak was seen kneeling beside the Bangladeshi Prime Minister. Such interactions are quite important. They allow frank conversations between leaders. They also prevent misunderstandings. At the G20, Bangladesh was also included in the Biofuel Alliance. Other members include the US, Italy, and the UAE. And India facilitated all of this. I'm sure Dhaka knows this. New Delhi can leverage its relations with the West to lobby for Bangladesh. And why is that important? Because the West is a huge market for Dhaka. Look at their top export destinations. Out of the top 10, 9 are Western countries. China does not even figure in this list. And most of this export is garments. If you see clothes in Europe or the US, most of them will say made in Bangladesh. So Dhaka needs the Western market. It's a question of who can provide the rest. I'm talking about investments and infrastructure, even defense equipment. Bangladesh is a proud country that was born out of war. They don't take kindly to foreign meddling. We know the West specializes in that. We also know that China does not care, which is why India's role is quite important. New Delhi will be hoping to strike a fine balance. On the one hand, keep Western pressure off Bangladesh, maybe even bring in some investments. On the other, keep Bangladesh within India's sphere of influence. You don't want to be ceding space, not even to allies like France or the US. It's a tough balance. But in the face of China's challenge, it could be India's only option. And now let's move from friends turned foes to friends in need. North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jongun is in Russia. He crossed the border this morning. He's in Russia to meet President Vladimir Putin. The meeting could take place in the far eastern city of Vladivostok. Putin is there for the Eastern Economic Forum. And on the sidelines of the forum, he's expected to court Kim. What is the purpose of this meeting? Reports say it's about weapons. Putin reportedly needs arms and ammunition for the war in Ukraine, and apparently he's turning to the militarized hermit kingdom for help. Will the deal go ahead, though? What will be the consequences, and what will Kim demand in exchange? Our next report has all the details.
Kim Jong-un is in Russia. His fancy green bulletproof train has crossed the North Korea-Russia border. He's now chugging along through Russia's Far East, heading to a meeting with Vladimir Putin. Kim began the journey with great fanfare. North Korean media released these pictures of his departure. The military even gave him a special send-off ceremony. Kim is on a mission to get the best deal possible for his destitute country. The North Korean leader finally seems to have a bargaining chip. The Hermit Kingdom may actually hold the key to the future direction of the war in Ukraine. Russia has been pulverizing Ukraine for almost 20 months now. That level of constant bombardment requires weapons. Its stockpiles are getting used up. So it seems Russia now seeks arms and ammunition from North Korea. This is what the West thinks anyway.
I think it's fair to say that having to travel across the length of his own country to ask,
but it's still his own country.
Yeah,
so,
I know, to meet with an international pariah to ask for assistance in a war that he expected to win in the opening month. Look, I would characterize it as him begging for assistance.
Putin is in the far eastern city of Vladivostok, officially for the Eastern Economic Forum. In normal years, it's a large affair with visits from multiple heads of state. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has attended in the past, as did former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. But this year, the Russian forum is a low-key affair, and Kim Jong-un is the only head of state due in Vladivostok. And he isn't even attending the forum. His meeting with Putin is taking place on the sidelines, and the West is closely watching it.
I will remind both countries that any transfer of arms from North Korea to Russia would be in violation of multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions. And we, of course, have aggressively enforced our sanctions against entities that fund Russia's war effort, and we will continue to enforce those sanctions and will not hesitate to impose new sanctions if appropriate.
He has a point. There are UN Security Council resolutions banning arms purchases from North Korea. Moscow itself voted to impose these restrictions. So if any weapons deal goes through, it'll face sanctions that it agreed upon. But Russia already faces a ton of sanctions for its war on Ukraine. And North Korea? The Hermit Kingdom has been drowning in sanctions for years. How much more damage can extra sanctions really do? So, is there really much for the countries to lose? Especially compared to what there is to gain. Russia will get weapons and ammunition, supplies that it needs for a shot in the arm in Ukraine. And North Korea can get a whole lot more. Kim's kingdom is facing a food crisis. The recent typhoons in the region have made it worse. Also, North Korea isn't exactly known for a stellar development record. It has missiles and artillery, but reportedly lacks electricity. So if a deal does materialize with Russia, Kim might receive food and power in exchange. When it comes to North Korea, however, there's always a nuclear agenda lurking under the surface. It's no secret that Pyongyang wants to become a nuclear power. It keeps testing nukes, making nuclear-capable missiles and submarines and everything in between. So will Kim ask for a boost to his nuclear program? Probably. But will Putin accept? That's the real question. Forgive the cliché, but we'll have to wait and watch.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Portugal, roads turned into rivers of wine. 2.2 million litres of wine flowed through the streets after a massive spill. In Morocco, people slept on the streets of Marrakesh days after the country's biggest earthquake. The death toll stands at nearly 3,000 as Morocco scrambles for aid. And an Indian Air Force tanker refueled fighter aircraft of the Egyptian Air Force mid-air. This was part of the military exercise Bright Star 23. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1959, the Soviet Union launched the Luna 2 space probe. This was the Soviet Union's second attempt to reach the moon. It was the first man-made spacecraft to reach the moon. We're leaving you on that note. It's goodbye from our Mumbai studio. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Só pode ter sido ao mar. Foi ataque, rebentou. E o perigo aqui está.
We've crossed 2 million subscribers on YouTube. This is arguably the fastest growing news platform, and we can't thank you enough for fueling this growth. All those of you who join us every day to watch this show and more, thank you. We launched Vantage 7 months ago, and these have been some very rewarding 7 months for us. So from the entire team here, heartfelt gratitude.